How's it going, everyone? AkibanaZero here, and this is another episode of getting into BlazBlue Crosstag Battle. Episode 3 is going to be all about controllers, and this is a really big burning question that a lot of people have when it comes to fighting games. They all keep thinking, oh, if I want to get into fighting games, I need to get an arcade stick, right? And those things are usually pretty expensive if you want to get a decent quality one. Well, I'm here to actually answer that question, and we're going to talk about this. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit in a bit of a FAQ sort of format to answer like a few frequently asked questions with some quick yes/no answers. I'm gonna follow that by talking about what kind of setup, what kind of controllers I use in fighting games, and finally I'm gonna talk about the different kinds of controllers that you can use and what are some of the advantages, disadvantages of each. So yeah, let's kick it off. So first question. Do I need to buy an expensive arcade stick to play a fighting game, particularly BlazBlue Crosstag Battle? The answer to that is no. You do not have to buy one. Question number 2 is, do I need to buy some kind of weird game, some kind of, pro grade gamepad in order to play fighting games like BlazBlue Crosstag Battle? And again, the short answer is no. The long answer is it depends on the gamepad you have available already. There are some gamepads that are not that great for playing fighting games on, and then there are some that are just fine, but then there are those that are made for fighting games that make them even better. Final question is, is it better to play one type of controller over another? And again, the answer to this is no, it is not. There are pro players out there like such as Luffy or Snake Eyes. These are professional Street Fighter players, and they play on pad. And both of these players have really high pedigrees in the fighting game circuit. Luffy in particular, he actually won an entire Evo using a very old PlayStation 1 pad, and I think it's actually one of those PlayStation 1 pads before the analog sticks. So yeah, you can understand that this is a really old controller. And yeah, so that's the truth over there. You don't have to be neither like Daigo, neither like Justin Wong, who use arcade sticks. You don't need to be like these people in order to play and enjoy fighting games. You should play the controller that speaks to you the most. Right, so with that out of the way, I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of controllers I use to play fighting games. So I'm a bit of a weird mix. I use both an arcade stick and a pad to play fighting games. Specifically to play Tekken 7, I use this controller over here, a DualShock 4 for the PlayStation 4. It's pretty good. I would use this for basically any 3D type of fighting game like Tekken, Soul Calibur. The reason is mostly habit. I'm very used to playing 3D fighters on a pad, and I've never actually sat down to play a 3D fighter on an arcade stick. So yeah, I can very easily go from a 2D fighter to a 3D fighter, and I will use this gamepad to play a 3D fighter. But for 2D fighters, I'm kind of a mix. I have this Mad Catz T2 stick, and I use this for games like Street Fighter V. And the reason I play on this arcade stick, Street Fighter V, is because I play what we call charge characters. And charge characters require you to hold back or down back for a certain period of time and then go up or forward and then hit a button. I just find it a lot easier to do on a stick than this. And the even longer answer is that I actually used to play Street Fighter on a pad, and when I moved to China, and that's where I started playing fighting games, especially Street Fighter, a little more competitively, I spent a lot of time in arcades with my friends, so I needed to work with a controller that was like the controller on the arcade, so I got used to using this arcade stick. The transition was not as fast as you would think it would be. It took me about a couple of weeks to say I can move about without needing to look at where my hands are going and stuff, and not to even like very intensely think about where I'm moving the stick around or whatever, but I would say that it took me at least a couple of months to fully get used to using an arcade stick over a pad. Now the other thing about me is that when it comes to any other 2D fighter besides Street Fighter, I'm actually open to playing with a gamepad as well. And the reason is because BlazBlue Crosstag Battle is going to be coming out on Nintendo Switch, and I want to be able to play on either my PS4 or my Switch when I'm on the go. So I think it would be a lot more versatile for me to be able to use a gamepad like this. This is a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 version of the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. It has a really nice D-pad over here, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the next section. And oops, I just ruined the video. Ha! Right. So yeah, this is my setup. This is what I do. This is how I play fighting games. You don't have to copy me. You don't have to take my word for it or whatever. I'm just going to talk right now about the different options you have and what you can do to get into fighting games. So first things first, like we said, the gamepads. DualShock 4 over here. Pretty good controller. Nice little D-pad over here, quite functional. You could even try using the analog sticks over here. That's perfectly fine. The Nintendo Switch Pro Controller is pretty amazing. I'm actually very, very surprised about how great this controller actually is. The D-pad looks really amazing. I haven't tried it on a fighting game yet, but once I do, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be very, very functional. Other options for gamepads include ones that are made specifically for fighting, like the Hori Fighting Commander 4, which is built for fighting games, and there's also Mad Catz. There's a Mad Catz fighting game gamepad. Mad Catz went under a while back, but recently they have announced that they're trying to bounce back. They're getting new office space and everything, so Mad Catz makes some really good quality fighting game controllers. So yeah, that's pretty exciting news for those who want to get something that's more like close to that. Other options include the Xbox One controller, which I've heard is actually quite functional compared to the Xbox 360's controller. There are a lot of pads out there. The one thing, and I wouldn't choose one over another. It all depends on, you know, like how used to them you are. The only thing I would advise against is using the Nintendo Switch burger, as I call it, like basically using the Joy-Con D-pad over here, because it's so disjointed. They're not really connected, and I can't see how you would be able to do quarter circle forward motions and stuff like that with it. And also, I don't know, it's kind of cool to use on platformers and playing Mario and stuff, but for fighting games, I think you need something a little niftier. And I think if you're going to be playing on a Nintendo Switch, this is going to be essential for you. But then again, I mean, you know, see how you feel about the analog sticks. I feel the Joy-Con analog sticks are really not that great. They're really not that great, honestly. So, but yeah, again, it all depends on what you want. The advantage of a gamepad is that it's very, very easy to carry around. You don't need a special bag for it. You can just toss it in your purse or toss it into your backpack, and it's all good. You can take it wherever you want, and it's really light. And also, usually it's not going to cost you anything extra. Like if you have a PlayStation 4, you already have a DualShock, so no problems there. You don't need to buy anything extra. If you have a Nintendo Switch, like I said, you might have to pick up something like this, but I feel it's worth it. Like, this is a really, really good controller. And, yeah, the disadvantages, the disadvantage I'm going to talk about depends a little bit on your finger dexterity, let's put it that way. Because with controllers like this one, you kind of need to map buttons in a certain way. Like, some people prefer to put their, like, high attacks or stuff up here and maybe nothing over here. that could be both a good thing and a bad thing to have buttons, like different commands assigned to different buttons. It could mean it could be a good thing for you, it could not be. You have to probably experiment with a button layout that works for you. I have a friend who plays really good Street Fighter V who has like this extremely weird button layout on his gamepad. So yeah, I mean, you might have to do a little bit of experimenting. That's what I would call a disadvantage. Now for an arcade stick, arcade sticks are really good because they overall have really good really good movement control. The stick, if you're used to using an arcade stick, moving with it is very good. It feels very normal, very natural. But you have to get used to it. If you're not used to playing an arcade stick, that's not really going to work for you. You're gonna have to, like, you know, spend some time getting used to it. The other advantage that arcade sticks have is that they have these really big buttons, and I like big buttons because they help me, you know, execute moves that require me to press more than one button a lot more easily. But that could be just me again. Disadvantage: arcade sticks can be a bit pricey. Okay, so if you're not in the market to get a controller for a specific kind of game that you may or may not play as often as you think, then perhaps maybe don't get an arcade stick at the end of the day. But if you feel like you're gonna really get into it, then yeah, it might be absolutely worth it. You could go for a Mad Catz once they start launching sticks around, unless you can find something in at Arcade Shock or some other website or whatnot. There's Trenba, which is a Chinese arcade stick maker, and they're making some really high quality stuff right now. They're really pushing the Western market, and they're making some really cool arcade sticks. So yeah, that's definitely one to check out. And there's also RWBY makes some really good arcade sticks as well, and they're some of the most affordable ones too. Now, if you happen to have an arcade stick, but you haven't like updated it for the latest consoles or whatever, you may not need to actually go and buy a whole new stick. You can actually buy the Brook Universal Fighting Board, which has actually been updated to work with the Switch as well. And that, all you need to do is just change the board with the Brook, the Brook Universal Fighting Board, and then you would be all set. And a Brook Fighting Board costs about $70–$80, so that's just a little bit cheaper than RWBY arcade sticks. So yeah, I think it's worth the money. You don't need to do any crazy soldering or anything like that. You can find a tutorial or whatever and you can install it, because yeah, it's been made to be, you know, like to be made easy for people to swap out a fighting board. So yeah, that's pretty good option right over there. Another disadvantage of arcade sticks is carrying them around. I mean, I happen to have a backpack that kind of fits my arcade stick, so that's fine, but, you know, kind of feels like, you know, a clunky thing to carry it around and all that. So, yeah, it's not as romanticized as you think it possibly is. Okay, let's look at some other obscure, a little bit more obscure types of controllers, and I'm going to name this first one an obscure one because nobody really uses this kind of controller for playing fighting games. I'm talking about the keyboard. A keyboard, there's been people who actually asked this, can I play fighting games on the keyboard? And here's my answer. You can, if you're not looking to play online or play against other people or whatever. You're just looking to play a little bit of single player stuff and, you know, like mess around a little bit. Keyboards are not very good for doing things like combos or anything that is any complex, very complex motions. I mean, you could do fireballs and stuff, but you have to be very precise. You have to be very precise with the way you piano your fingers across the buttons. Now, there are people out there who have actually pulled it off and they can play fighting games decently, competently with a keyboard, but I think keyboards are better left for playing FPSs and RPGs and stuff. And finally, this is a very obscure type of controller, but it's seen a little bit of popularity. It has a bit of a cult following, if you will, as a controller, and this is the Hitbox. The Hitbox is a nice little marriage, I think, between an arcade stick, a gamepad, and a keyboard. It takes some of the best parts of those worlds and just mashes it up into this weird thing. And I've seen demonstrations of people executing moves very, very accurately and quickly using the using a hitbox. The thing about the hitbox is that if you are actually into building things of your own, is that you could actually build one yourself. There's nothing really fancy about it. You could get a Brook fighting board, for example. You could find a casing, a few buttons, and you could make a hitbox. Why not? I mean, it seems like it could be something viable for you to do. You could also buy a hitbox from several outlets, I guess, but it's kind of obscure. And I think that if you don't have that much experience with fighting games, I think it might not be a very good investment to buy a hitbox, because maybe it might not end up being for you. And if you don't have much experience and it feels weird to you, then you might have ended up, spending money for something that you can't really use effectively. But it's an interesting controller, nevertheless. It's very interesting that there seems to be some pro players have been making the switch, so to speak, towards it to some degree of success, I guess. But yeah, that all depends on your preference. So there you go. These are the controllers that you could possibly use to play fighting games. There have been people who have used even more obscure stuff, but that's mostly for funsies. But yeah, that's what's available out there. Take your pick. Choose what is useful, what you are used to playing with. That is, to me, the most essential thing, is that you stick to something that's familiar and you try to make it work for you. Don't try to be governed by the controller that you're using, because to be quite honest with you, switching controllers could actually set you back, especially if you're trying to be competitive of sorts. So try to play with what you got. Like if you have a pad, a competent pad like an Xbox One controller, or a DualShock 4, or a Switch Pro controller, stick with that. I think you would actually find that a lot better than picking up a controller that might be more expensive, like a stick or a hitbox, and then ending up hating it, you know? So yeah, that's my advice. That's what I think about controllers. If you have any other questions about controllers whatsoever, please, by all means, leave a question in the comment section below, or you can tweet me at AkibanaZero. I'll be more than happy to talk about controllers with you. And yeah, that's gonna do it. That's gonna be the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to leave the video a like, because it helps my channel a lot. And if you're enjoying my content, please consider subscribing, and I will catch you next time.